Hi there, folks. Welcome to this LinkedIn Live learning session with ThinScale technology on the VDI and DaaS topic of how secure is your virtual environment. My name is Lauren Taggart, and I'm the Global Director of Sales here at ThinScale Technology. Richard Martindale, as advertised, unfortunately could not join the session because he's very poorly. So stepping in last minute, thankfully, is Baz van Goor, who's Richard's manager and our Director of Customer Success. So thank you, Baz, for being able to join last minute.
No problem. Happy to be here.
So the agenda, folks, today that we're going to discuss is the most common VDI threats that we see in the industry. What then are the most susceptible attack vectors with those threats? Common mistakes that we have seen from some of our customers, some of our knowledge throughout the years of being in the industry. Share then some best practices that we share with both of our clients, prospects, and that we want you to take away from today. Then talking of the specific topic of endpoint security itself and the ThinScale virtual desktop agent that we have available. And then we'll open the floor up for any questions that you may have for us to answer. So Baz, let's jump straight into it for our audience today and start discussing the most common VDI threats that you see out there.
Yeah, no problem. So the most common VDI threats, or the most common threats that I see currently, are around the ransomware. So somebody stealing or encrypting your data in your VDI environment and demanding basically ransom to release that particular data or the whole VDI system for you to use. Closely followed by malware that has been deployed to either the VDI and or the endpoint with the purpose of installing keylogging type of softwares where they can use those to exfiltrate credentials of your environment. Think about malware extracting username and passwords, and heaven forbid, even administrator username and passwords to gain administrative access over your VDI environment, and then they can do whatever they would like with it. If they can't use any malware and don't have used ransomware, but they will use a technology like or a technique like a DDoS. So that's a denial of service attack against your VDI environment by spinning up an awful lot of connection attempts to your environment, rendering the VDI environment as not available for your regular users. So that severely impacts your business by not being able to use your VDI environment itself.
Sure.
Environments where they use unsecured access from unverified network or unsecured devices. So whilst people think that within the VDI environment, everything will happen in the VDI environment, they will be safe, they often forget about the endpoint connecting to that particular environment. Yeah. Data exfiltration. So whenever you're within your VDI environment, it's not unthinkable that without any DLP type of solution in place, your user of that particular VDI environment can extract data, rightly or wrongly, and send it to either themselves and or save it on their personal device and use that for competitive access or anything. But the point being that data is being transferred between your VDI environment and a third party. Last but not least, the man-in-the-middle attacks. So if you look at the endpoint itself and the VDI environment, if you don't protect anything and don't have anything in between those, like a VPN of sorts, then it's not unthinkable that somebody will execute a man-in-the-middle attack and effectively gain access to your environment and or data via that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Baz. I think the next thing, let's move on to the most susceptible attack vectors that we see in terms of those are the threats, but what are the factors that bring to?
Yeah, for sure. So if you look at the attack vectors used by criminals and or hackers to gain access to your VDI environment, we typically see they use or we see attack vectors being used as unsupported and unsecured and unrestricted devices, even devices being infected with malware that gain access to your environment. devices not being patched, so not being maintained to the proper standard. The usage of public Wi-Fi, you will never be certain who else is using that same public Wi-Fi and is looking into or snooping your data using the public Wi-Fi connection. Not using any encryption technology on the endpoint tunnel towards the VDI environment, so no VPI in play, those type of things. And as mentioned earlier, credential leakage is an attack vector that is one of the biggest, either gaining credentials via social engineering technologies, insider leakage of credentials for hacking your environment, or malware that keylogs and retrieves username and passwords, and dare I say it, the administrator username and password to gain access to your environment.
Very good. Thank you, Baz. I think it's fair to say that through our experience of working in ThinScale technology, more often than not, we see people coming to us more reactively. Of course, we want to encourage everybody today to be more proactive around securing their VDI environments. Often breaches are the most common mistake that we see in terms of how to protect against those. So maybe jump in and talk about some of the common mistakes that we've seen over the past number of years.
Yeah, and common mistakes are not necessarily done on purpose, but what we see as an educational piece, and or when we have conversations with our customers, is that indeed they think the VDI is the level and the boundary of protection, and the endpoint connecting to that particular VDI environment is often forgotten about. So whilst they've got everything set up, fully configured to the highest level of security within that particular VDI environment, they will allow any endpoint, regardless of make, vendor, or security in place on that particular device, connect to the VDI environment. Usage of a VDI alone, so effectively using a VDI that bridges the connection between the endpoint towards the VDI environment, and then assuming the VDI is safe. We've got that particular tunnel, we encrypt the data that goes between the endpoint and the VDI environment, so surely we are safe. But again, on that particular scenario, the VPN is there to bridge that particular gap between the endpoint and the VDI. It's not doing you no favors on the endpoint itself. So whilst you might have a compromised endpoint that uses a VPN, the compromised endpoint will use that particular secure tunnel to connect to the VDI environment. Unvetted endpoints. So endpoint without any controls or checks put in place. So these are the endpoints that are either a bring your own device unsecured endpoint, or a corporate endpoint being in play, where you do not check the posture of that particular device prior to allowing that particular machine to to connect to your VDI environment.
Very good. And from those common mistakes, I think it's fair to say that we've learned a lot of common best practices that we advise a lot of our clients today. Maybe let's share for the audience today some best practices that they can take away and start implementing from this session.
Yep, for sure. So the best practices that we always recommend is endpoint security. So make sure that you've got the right proper tools in place on that particular endpoint to secure the endpoint, to lock it down, and to have technologies in place that will make the endpoint operate in almost a zero trust model, where you only allow the applications required on that particular device to be executed. Once you have that in place, and you use that in combination with, for example, a VPN, then you've got your endpoint secured. You use your VPN to establish the tunnel between the endpoint and the VDI to guarantee that the data that travels between your secured endpoint and the VPN is encrypted. If you then leverage the host checking capabilities on the VPN or on the VDI environment as well, you can ensure that any device that is attempting to make that particular connection meets the criteria that you specify for a device connecting. So the host checker will be the gatekeeper and sees and checks if the endpoint security on the endpoint is of the standard that you desire. And last but not least is restricting access to certain type of networks. So some people allow the use of public networks like public Wi-Fi's. Other organizations tend to steer away from them and only allow devices to connect on not open Wi-Fi, but secured Wi-Fi connections as well. So that whole combination of understanding the endpoint, the way that you can establish the connection between the VPI protected with the VPN, perform a host check that you ensure that it is secure and only the right devices connect using the proper network.
Very good. Thank you, Baz. I think it's fair to say, and maybe hopefully not too big-headed of us, that I find that we're pretty much experts in terms of endpoint security. It's what we practice, what we preach every day, and what we help our clients achieve. Part of the technology that I don't think, even as director of sales, I think we do a very good job of selling is our virtual desktop agent. I think it's a key component of our technology that can ensure that the access of which a company wants their employees to log in can be secured as well, and that they can log in the correct way. So maybe let's start kicking off by talking about endpoint security and then talking a little bit about our virtual desktop agent, Baz.
Yeah, no problem. So endpoint security, or the ThinScale endpoint security, serves a couple of purposes. It is applicable for a bring your own type of device or a corporate device. So the ownership of the device for us is irrelevant. We can apply the same security policy on any type of device. And with the usage of our device lockdown functionality, we have the ability to lock down the device, make sure that it is up to date with the right level of patching. The third-party software updates will be done on that particular device as well, so we can ensure that it's Windows is up to date to the latest patches. The VDI client or the VPN client or the combination of the two that you use to connect to your VDI environment will be updated to the latest approved client with your organization. We will restrict access to all the relevant device peripherals on your device, so USB blocking and those type of things are in place for preventing data exfiltration type of scenarios. We tightly integrate with all the VDI providers using our connectors. Those are applicable to the Microsoft AVD, Citrix, VMware, AWS, all the major players that offer VDI or DaaS type of solutions. And that will bring you the single sign-on experience and have the ability to pass on keystrokes between the two, etc. Everything that I just discussed is driven by our process security engine. Our process security engine is the core foundation of the product. It will operate always in a zero trust type model. So trust nothing. You need to explicitly allow the processes that you want to run on your device. So in a VDI scenario, it is the VPN client and the VDI client that we will whitelist, and we will control what those particular clients can do on the endpoint as well. By doing this particular zero trust approach, we'll block everything on that particular device. So you can rest assured there is no intervention by malware, ransomware, or any viruses on that particular device. No keyloggers, no nothing. We will only execute and run on that device the whitelisted processes that you have in your environment. And again, that is regardless of it being a corporate device that you've got full control over, or a bring your own device that is on demand being used to establish a secure session.
Very good. Thanks, Baz. And maybe let's talk about that virtual desktop agent that I so passionately love.
Yeah, no problem. The virtual desktop agent of ThinScale sits within the VDI environment. It's a component that you install on top of your VDI solution, and it will act and serve almost as a gatekeeper on that particular platform. It will establish and uses the established virtual channel between the endpoint and the VDI environment to assess and posture check and host check the device connecting to the VDI environment. With it, we can set up a simple set of rules that you want to apply to that particular environment, and we only allow devices matching that particular list of points that we check for to establish that particular VDI connection. And by having this in place, we automatically exclude any device that is not properly protected and secured by ThinScale to connect to your VDI environment.
Baz, thank you so much. I hope our audience today have got a lot from this session and some key takeaways. I'd love to open the last 10 minutes of our session today. If anybody wants to pop into the chat, any questions that you have, we'd love to answer those for you. One question, Baz, that pops up as you were talking, and I had to hide my excitement because I love when this question comes up, and in particular because I have debates all the time with some of my former colleagues in other places and infrastructure managers around why is there this misconception that VPNs are secure by themselves, and I love that topic. So maybe if you can answer that would be super.
Yeah, we'll give it a go. So the VPN serves a great purpose of securing the data that travels, or the network connection that travels from the endpoint towards the VDI environment. So whilst the VPN does a brilliant job in making sure that that particular connection and the data that travels over that particular connection is secure, it doesn't do anything around the device on the endpoint side of the connection. So if that particular device is still riddled with malware, has keylogging software on it, it will happily use the encrypted VPN tunnel to use that as a go-between to go to your VDI environment. So whilst then you can't see what is happening on that particular data channel, you still are susceptible for the compromised endpoint that might connect to your VDI environment.
Very good. Thanks, Baz.
No problem.
Another question that's came in is looking at host checks, for example. What should they be looking for checking for when it's scanning a device?
Yeah, for sure. So with ThinScale, we've got the flexibility to configure the host checking in multiple ways. If we predominantly want to check for security, as that is our main topic, and not necessarily the usability of the device and anything related to ensure that the digital user experience of that particular device is meeting your needs, let's switch that to host checking on security. If we want to host check based on security, we will be looking for is the Windows or are the Windows updates installed to the level that you want? Is the firewall enabled, active, and controllable by ThinScale? Is there any antivirus software installed and up to date and running their regular checks? Is there anti-malware or ransomware software? Those type of security checks. If you've got those in place, then you can ensure that that particular device is meeting some of the controls for your compliancy, and then you can allow that particular device to connect. So again, you can split it up between checking for security or checking for an experience that you want to guarantee, and that's more around CPU memory type of checks, then the number of monitors that particular device has, how that machine operates throughout the session. But I'll leave that for a topic for another time.
Very good. That's it. You've already got the next LinkedIn Live for us anyway, Baz, there. Perfect. I don't see any more questions in the chat, Baz. I just want to personally thank you for joining me today. It's been wonderful to have you and explore this. Obviously wish Rich, our colleague, a speedy recovery on his brief illness. And I also want to thank our audience today. Hopefully everybody's got something that they can take away and start practicing and applying in their business. If you have any more questions or anything that we can help you with, feel free to reach out to us both on LinkedIn, or hello@thinscale.com is another way to reach us both. Thank you very much, folks, and I hope to see you at the next LinkedIn Live session with ThinScale Technology.
Thank you very much.